Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Ask an Expert session all about green hydrogen and environmental justice. I am here with Carlos Garcia and Benjamin Gallagher. They're both from Bloom Energy. Can you both just introduce yourself and speak a little bit more about your roles before we jump in? Carlos first.
Yeah, I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos Garcia. I'm a federal policy manager for Bloom in DC. Prior to this, I was working in New York City for the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, working on some federal, but mostly state and city policy and energy and market design and program development, and even some project development of in-city community-owned energy generation assets, like the largest solar array in New York City. And I work for Bloom, helping them with their federal policy analysis, writing, and environmental justice integration. Nice to meet you all.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ben Gallagher. I am the market strategy manager with Bloom Energy. My primary focus is creating go-to-market strategies for our new verticals. I'm a recent hire at Bloom. Joined this summer, and before Bloom, I was working at Wood Mackenzie, leading hydrogen market research and consulting efforts. And thank you for having both of us.
Great, thanks. And while you all were introducing myself, I realized I did not introduce myself. I'm Deonna Anderson, senior editor at GreenBiz, where I cover the circular economy, retail, consumer goods. I am not a green hydrogen expert, so I will be following my curiosity today with the questions that I ask, and I encourage you all to also ask questions. That's what this session is all about. So the way this session is going to work is Carlos is going to give a brief presentation about the work that they're doing with green hydrogen at Bloom Energy. And then we will pivot to Q&A, and you can either request to share your audio and video and hop on screen to ask questions, or you can put them in the chat or Q&A, and I will be facilitating that section of the session. So Carlos, you can share your slides and get started.
Awesome, thank you. All right, let's see how we do this here. Okay, Deonna, can you see the slides?
Yes.
Awesome, great. Yeah, so thanks, Deonna, and hello, everyone. Again, my name is Carlos Garcia, and thank you for logging in to hear a little bit about Bloom Energy and our current work and vision towards energy equity and justice. As I've said, I work on Bloom's federal team in DC as a policy manager. So I mostly focus on federal policy and laws and how they would affect our project development efforts on the ground in the different cities and states. And as I'm sure you've all heard in the news and throughout different panels, federal energy policy continues to be a roller coaster with euphoric highs and despondent lows. But that is neither here nor there, and I won't have to cover federal policy updates on this panel. And instead, I'd love to introduce everyone to Bloom and our current efforts. One of Bloom's most exciting growth levers is our electrolyzer for green hydrogen product. And as shown in a recent study by McKinsey, global hydrogen demand is conservatively expected to grow 8 times in the coming 2 decades. Providing a little bit under 20% of global energy supply. Not only is this great news for global workforce development goals, but it may also be the silver bullet for those hard to decarbonize sectors, such as transportation and industrial processes. At Bloom, we can provide 3 different types of hydrogen: green, pink, and blue. We believe the future of energy generation is green hydrogen and are doing everything in our power to ensure that that is the outcome. But for those unfamiliar with green hydrogen is created by taking excess energy created by renewable energy assets, which may have otherwise been curtailed, running it through our electrolyzers to create pure green hydrogen, and then running that green hydrogen through our non-combustion fuel cells to generate electricity. With this, we have a chance of achieving our ultimate dream, which is energy generation with 0 polluting emissions. We are also collaborating with the U.S. Department of Energy's Idaho National Laboratory, also known as INL, to pilot pink hydrogen, which uses excess electricity and heat from nuclear facilities to create pink hydrogen. And lastly, in specific areas where neither green nor pink hydrogen is physically or practically feasible, we have blue hydrogen, which extracts hydrogen from natural gas through a process called reformation and captures the carbon emissions associated with reformation and sequesters or delivers that CO2 stream for other industrial uses. Of course, the technology and process of an electrolyzer is extremely complex, but in an attempt to describe it, I get to tell the story of how and why Bloom was formed, which I tell every chance I get because it's so awesome. So in the 1990s, Dr. K.R. Sridhar, our CEO, and a small NASA team of university researchers created a fuel cell device that could use solar power to split Martian water into oxygen for breathing and hydrogen for the use of fuel for vehicles for the manned mission to Mars project. When their NASA project ended in 2001, Dr. Sridhar's team shifted focus to develop this Mars mission technology in reverse, to create electricity from oxygen and fuel. And so Bloom Energy was born. The process of producing hydrogen from water, the electrolyzer, does require energy, but what sets Bloom apart from our competitors, apart from our amazing efficiency, also is that our electrolyzer and fuel cells run and crave high temperatures, which actually decreases the amount of electricity needed to create hydrogen. And so delving a little bit further into the hydrogen economy's future, we can talk about some of the regulatory possibilities that might help catalyze the market. As I'm sure everyone here is aware today, Congress is in the middle of passing, we hope, two major pieces of legislation that would greatly affect the US's direction and speed towards a greener economy: the bipartisan infrastructure bill and a reconciliation bill. Politics surrounding the legislative process around the two bills aside, I'd like to highlight one of the provisions in the reconciliation bill that could greatly impact the development of green hydrogen in the US. First introduced by Senator Tom Carper of Delaware, chairman of the Senate Committee on Environmental and Public Works and senior member of the Senate Finance Committee, the Clean H2 production legislation aims to support the shift to a renewable energy economy by boosting clean hydrogen production. And this legislation would be incorporated into the reconciliation bill and create a 10-year tax credit to foster the development of clean hydrogen by creating a Section 45 production tax credit of up to $30 per kilogram of clean hydrogen, This bill and many others provide businesses with the positive market signals needed to support development of clean technologies like Bloom's energy servers. Now that we have a little context for hydrogen's future and Bloom Energy's past, we can explore how Bloom is working to be a part of the current environmental justice movement. Climate justice, for those unfamiliar with the term, is based on the principle that frontline communities are most vulnerable to climate change and therefore must play an integral role in planning for climate resiliency. These communities where climate vulnerabilities intersect, these are the communities, where climate vulnerabilities intersect with historical patterns of environmental burdens that disproportionately affect low-income communities and communities of color. And one of the ways that Bloom hopes to provide real value in the environmental justice movement is through the development of microgrids. Microgrids are miniature versions of the centralized electric grid that dispatches, distributes, and regulates the flow of electricity and can operate and switch between either grid-connected or islanded modes. Bloom provides power generation to support critical loads in the microgrids in both modes of operation. So underserved and disadvantaged towns and communities can address grid disruptions and blackouts caused by inclement weather or natural disasters with a community or campus microgrid. But what does really, resiliency mean for a community and for a neighborhood? Creating a microgrid powered by a Bloom power cell can greatly improve a community's resiliency by providing 24/7 uninterrupted power, reduce energy costs, avoid transmission and distribution investments, improve localized air pollution through its reduction, reduce water usage, and energy security and resiliency under extreme weather threats, as shown by the two examples on the slide. For many low to middle income communities, losing power during a storm can make the difference between paying your rent on time or falling behind on your bills. Not only do frontline communities have to deal with the economic costs stemming from storms, such as repairs of homes and businesses, or any medical bills stemming from accidents, but they also have to deal with the localized disaster multiplier effect, also known as ripple effects, associated with the shock to a local economy. The multiplier effect reflects impacts to multiple economic sectors that are linked through supply chain disruptions, such as those caused by extreme weather events or outages. When an extreme weather disruption occurs, such as a flood or a heat wave, and knocks out the power to a local community, employees are unable to work and paychecks are cut. When a heat wave knocks out the power to a local grocery store and their food supplies perish due to the lack of refrigeration, people may have to spend more money to travel and buy expensive food at a distant deli or grocery store. People should not have to choose between having food at their table and paying their rent or medical bills because the electrical grid wasn't ready to handle the effects of climate change. As we are seeing more and more in the news, these are no longer theoretical examples of the effects of climate change, but instead real-world case studies of our inability to adapt our energy generation and transmission systems in time. And there are no more excuses. So these are just some of the ways that Bloom's efforts to develop microgrids can see immediate and lasting effects in environmental justice communities. And lastly, I'm very proud to share with everyone Bloom's recent efforts to combat an issue that we've identified as a pervasive problem throughout the United States: backup diesel generators. In a new study released earlier this month, funded by Bloom and performed by economic and public policy consulting group M3, research shows a proliferation of backup generators across California, with nearly 90% being diesel fueled, posing significant obstacles not only to achieving greenhouse gas reduction targets, but also driving nearly $136 million in annual health costs. Diesel generators create greenhouse gases, particulate matter known as PM, volatile organic compounds known as VOCs, nitrous oxides known as NOx, and sulfur dioxide known as SO2, which are all harmful pollutants that create smog and exacerbate respiratory conditions. And the report concludes that diesel generators in the South Coast and Base Area communities alone have 12.2 gigawatts of generation capacity and produce roughly 20 metric tons of fine particulate matter, 62 metric tons of VOCs, and almost 1,000 metric tons of NOx annually. That's the equivalent of 15 natural gas plants. Close to 1/5 of all South Coast and San Francisco Bay Area community generators are located in communities highly vulnerable to pollution. And as we've seen play out with the respiratory related issues and mortality rates of COVID-19, most of these communities tend to be low to middle income communities of color. And so as we work to perform similar studies around other major US cities, we're looking to form alliances with local environmental and environmental justice organizations to help create an action plan on how to address this very clear proliferation of dirty diesel backup generators while working to understand the local community needs and priorities. Bloom understands that local community and environmental justice organizations may already have plans for the community, whether it be a comprehensive community energy plan or the development of more circular economy. We're here to listen. Listen, uplift voices, and hopefully support those efforts with the amazing and groundbreaking product that is Bloom's electrolyzer and energy servers. Thank you very much. And let me see how I can stop sharing this. There we go.
Thank you, Carlos. I started encouraging folks to share their questions in the Q&A. But before we get to that, hopefully you all engage with us. I have a question. So there are environmental organizations that kind of push back against hydrogen. And you mentioned nitrous oxide because they say that green hydrogen generates a lot of that. And I'm curious about like how Bloom Energy is kind of different, how you all, how do you respond to that basically?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that, Benjamin, unless you want to.
No, go ahead, Carlos. I'll follow up.
Yeah, great. And so, I can pull this a little bit from my work previously in New York, where we actually formed a coalition called the Peak Coalition to combat peaker plants in New York City, which are pervasive and located mostly in disadvantaged communities and frontline communities. The main distinction for us versus the issues related with hydrogen and nitrous oxide emissions is that Bloom is non-combustion. So when you combust hydrogen, doesn't matter whether it's green hydrogen, which is just hydrogen made from water and renewables, or blue or pink, doesn't matter. When you combust it, when you burn it, you release a massive amount of nitrous oxides. When you don't combust it, you release none. So even now today, we don't release any nitrous oxides. So that's a way where if you're seeing the immediate effects, exacerbating health effects of peaker plants or diesel generators or regular power plants, or what have you, and a lot of that is exacerbated from sulfur dioxides and nitrous oxides, replacing those with a Bloom energy server, you immediately see decreases to zero, depending on how prolific you install our energy servers. So the response to that is, we agree with you. Nitrous oxides, when you burn hydrogen, horrible. And in some cases, like in New York, where they have laws specifically against nitrous oxides, it's antithetical to the whole point of creating those laws, putting in combustible green hydrogen. For us, we relish in that fact because we provide and we create no nitrous oxides through non-combustion. But yeah, Ben, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, of course. So in case it was unclear, so Bloom has two product lines that we've just launched, which is our solid oxide fuel cell that consumes hydrogen and our electrolyzer that produces hydrogen. So on the consumption side, the fuel cell, that is, as Carlos identified, an electrochemical reaction. There is no combustion. So no nitrous oxide are produced if you have our stationary fuel cell, and it consumes hydrogen. That's not an issue. On the production side, from our electrolyzer will use 100% renewable electricity and water to produce that hydrogen. That hydrogen in that process is not combusted, so it's not a concern there for either product lines. There are many theoretical and proposed use cases for hydrogen where it is combusted. That's something that's not on our radar at the moment. So just to kind of underscore, again, the products that we manufacture and sell do not combust either natural gas, biogas, or hydrogen. And in addition, we are not targeting end-use applications where hydrogen would be combusted, and you could see those harmful emissions.
Got it. Someone named Greg asked to come on screen, so I'm going to add them now. But if it takes them a while to get at it, I will ask this question from the chat. Does Bloom have a plan to tackle inequity in this sector as it relates to prospective candidates that do have experience needed to contribute to the mission of sustainability and energy resiliency, but do not have economic means to obtain typical college level education? That feels, yeah.
Yeah, I can take that one. So that's great, right? I think that really speaks to the heart of workforce development, but also talking about hope, maybe even transitioning sectors, right? You may be without a college education working some union job, and maybe you might be working on oil plants or electrical work or what have you. And really, when you look at the boom that this just transition can really create, it 100% makes sense that having a really solid workforce development plan in place is smart. For Bloom and who we hire, and I'll push you to other people in our company who really focus on workforce development plans and things like that. For the intersection for us with environmental justice and workforce development, we really look to the communities to really tell us the best way and the most immediate needs that the people in their community who they represent, what they need from us, how we can help, and how we can help shape our project development goals to also meet those needs. The one thing that, working with an environmental justice organization and representing many in my previous role, the one thing that people hate is when big corporations, primarily big white corporations, come and tell local communities what they need, how they should do it, when they should do it, and in what order. Many times, communities know what they need, know what the issues are, know how to solve them, know the best way to have some of their problems solved and resolved. and they just need help, whether it be through equity, whether it be through technology, whether it be through actual workforce development plans and goals, and helping those to succeed. So for us, it's really going forward is how can we tap into the resources and the ideas that these communities already have and help support them through what we think is the very obvious best answer, which, like I said, is the ultimate goal of energy generation without any combustion and any emissions. The byproduct of hydrogen combustion through our fuel cells is water. And that's pretty clean. So yeah, Ben, I don't know if you had anything to add to that as well.
No, I think you perfectly characterized it and summed that up, Carlos.
Appreciate that.
Are there any specific environmental justice orgs that you've engaged with already? I think you kind of started speaking to that with your work in California, but any others?
Yeah, so our again, I think for our California team, and one thing that I did impress upon Bloom when I came over is that one shoe size doesn't fit all in the environmental justice space, and that's something that I learned even working with the Peace Corps in Peru, is that the environmental issues and concerns and politics in California are very different than the ones in New York, and are very different than the ones in Michigan, and are very different than the ones in every other place. And so are the connections, and so are the orders in which you have discussions, and the orders in which don't want to go over people's heads, you don't want to step on anybody's toes, you don't want to disrespect anybody or duplicate efforts. So the California team who has been we're based out of California, so they very much so have relationships and have orders and steps that they're taking to go through the appropriate steps and channels for the environmental justice space in California. The immediate benefit that I bring to this company is my experience in New York. And so apart from my past employer, the New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, who's really the lead environmental justice organization in New York, who helped write the State Climate Action Plan, the CLCPA, along with New York Renews, along with We Act. We're working right now to really, conclude the study, like I said, of the one we did in California for New York, to really have a concrete plan and understanding of the issues in New York. And then, like I said, I already know very intimately the plans that environmental justice and environmental organizations of New York have for their city and their state, of how they want to see a just transition and how they want to see frontline communities lead the way. And we're there to just help along the way. So once we have that kind of presentation and that package that we say, hey, we have an understanding of what you guys want to do, here's how we think we can help. And if that's not how you want us to help, and you want us to help another way, then that's okay too. We're really not there or anywhere to tell people what they should do and how they should do it. For environmental justice organizations who have always seen the brunt and the burden of our energy systems, and the blunt and the burden of policies and racist community planning, we're not there to add to that. We're there to be the part of the solution, not just exacerbate the problem.
And also to just underscore that this is not a California problem. I saw not work done in conjunction with Bloom, I believe, and unfortunately, if you're out there, I don't know who the organization was, but I saw a recent study that said there's about 11 gigawatts of diesel generators in New York City. There's a power plant over here. It's called Big Alice. It's about 2.5 gigawatts. So multiple power plants worth of backup generators, which use diesel. So it's an extremely dirty solution. And that study also found that about 40% of the diesel generators in New York City are in environmental justice communities. And I would imagine the number would be much larger, but there is a law in New York City that requires buildings above a certain height have a backup generator. So you find most of those generators are in Manhattan, but if it wasn't for that law, I would imagine the composition would look quite different. So this is a national issue of concern. So just wanted to underscore this is not just a California issue.
Totally. Thanks for underscoring that. So there is a question in the Q&A related to microgrids. So in natural disaster scenarios / grid failures, how is the hydrogen supply chain affected in getting hydrogen to the servers?
Excellent question. So currently, our traditional product line is based off of natural gas and biogas. That product has direct hookups to the existing infrastructure, which is so resilient, they don't even make academic papers about the resiliency of the natural gas infrastructure. It's very difficult to find. On the hydrogen side, so we are not fully transitioning, but are offering stationary fuel cells that consume hydrogen. How exactly that looks over time has yet to be really determined because there's several factors. One, we don't know, generally speaking, in the US, how the hydrogen supply chain will evolve. So there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty. In some applications, some types of customers will have electrolyzers on site with their fuel cell. So then that supply issue won't be a concern. But for other customers, that won't be the case. So for example, we have a lot of deployments at Home Depots here in New York. Parking lot space is a premium. So that type of customer wouldn't have an electrolyzer and a fuel cell most likely. So how the supply chain evolves overall, not just for Bloom, but for anyone in the hydrogen market in the US or in Europe or in Japan or in South Korea or in Australia, has sort of the same problem. Yes, in theory, if this was a highly centralized distribution system of hydrogen, that could also see many of the flaws that the current fossil fuel distribution system exhibits in natural disasters. So that's been a problem for Hurricane Ida and Hurricane Katrina in Louisiana. Diesel generators running out of fuel. So that is a concern. So I don't have a direct answer to that question. I will say there'll be some types of customers that use hydrogen fuel cells that also have electrolyzers on site, which will solve that issue. And then overall, and then for the other set of customers, we have to figure out how the overall supply chain evolves. But yes, they are right. We don't want to fall into that trap that the existing fossil fuel system has. So we're going to have to evaluate, us as Bloom is going to have to evaluate options on how to meet those needs in disasters, and so will our customers.
And a little addition to Ben, also, you are able to store hydrogen. So, and that's one of the things that makes it resilient, right? So, when we have excess energy from renewable energy assets, we can create a bunch of hydrogen, store it for when we actually need it. And should a natural, a great example, let's say that we know a hurricane's coming, and we have a bunch of excess solar and wind energy that otherwise would have been curtailed. And curtailed just means, closed off and just not being sent anywhere. Send that to Bloom electrolyzers, have them make green hydrogen, store it in case the worst of the worst happens, a flood or a heat wave or whatever happens. And then when that heat wave or that storm comes and most of the grid gets knocked out, you can island off that whole area, use Bloom's power cells and have that stored hydrogen run through them and create electricity throughout the whole storm when other areas are knocked out. As we've seen in that grocery store and as we saw with that 9/11 call center all in New York during Superstorm Isaiah.
Got it. Thank you all. So we have 1 minute left, and I don't really want to end on a bad question, negative question. So I'm curious if you all can share like any positive examples of folks in environmental justice orgs that have like really been able to deploy green energy infrastructure that you point to as like great examples of, on the ground solutions. Yeah.
Carlos?
Yeah, I'm the biggest self-promoting and friend-promoting guy you may ever meet. And so, my old organization, I'll say it again for the 5th time, and I'll say it however many times I can, New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, also known as NEJA, they're amazing. And I think they are, they're one of the number one thought leaders in the environmental justice space concerning energy policy and energy market design, tackling peaker plants and replacing them with renewables and energy storage and grid infrastructure upgrades and modernization efforts. So for me, it was an honor and an absolute pleasure to work for them and represent them and really push their energy efforts really, I hope, forward. And they continue to be a really massive source of inspiration and one that we really hope and look forward to working with. So again, it's NEJA, New York City Environmental Justice Alliance, for sure, my number one.
And I think, I don't know exactly, as I said, I'm a relatively new employee of Bloom, but a few years ago, we deployed a stationary fuel cell system, energy server system at a low-income community and on the border between Brooklyn and Queens, again, to highlight my hometown of New York. So it's just wanted to bring that to the fold as well.
Great. Thank you both for sharing those. I'm sure that Carlos and Ben would love to chat more with you all, so feel free to connect with them. There is about 30 minutes left of Verge. Feel free to go to the forum and the networking to connect with other folks as well. And before you leave, please take the survey. We at GreenBiz like the feedback so we can continue to improve our work in these events. And if there's nothing else, enjoy the rest of your week, y'all.
Thank you, Deonna. Thank you, GreenBiz. Thanks so much. And thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.